I don't know him, so for me this would be the first acquaintance. I'm meeting the Acting Secretary of Homeland Security, Mr. McAleenan, and I believe I'm meeting the NSA, Mr. O'Brien. So those are the four meetings that I have. I thought I should take the opportunity to also visit some of the think tanks and share with them our thinking for a variety of reasons. One, we've had the elections in India, we've had events after the elections. There are larger sort of geopolitical happenings in the world where people, today what is India's viewpoint, what is India's interest is something which matters to people in Washington. So I'm doing a round. Obviously each one would have a different focus. I did the first one today in Carnegie, but I have tomorrow two of them, I think, Atlantic Council and CSIS. CSIS is the one I'm going with the script, so it'll be more formal, longer speech kind of thing. But most of the others are really interactions. And then I have Brookings and Heritage on my third day. Congress, as you know, is not in session. So actually that's normally you were there too. And in New York, the New York, since I didn't have a chance to meet any of you in New York, I'll just kind of give you a flavor of what happened in New York. We did this time a number of plurilaterals, 7 if my memory serves me right, which is Quad. Somewhere at my level, somewhere at PM's level. The ones at PM's level were FIPIC, the Pacific Island, and the CARICOM. And these two are important because one, there are a very large number of small states there. Now today we have really a big development assistance program, and they do focus on states on regions such as FIPIC and CARICOM. With FIPIC, we've also been active in working with them in responding to natural disasters. Well, CARICOM too, I guess. And CARICOM has the ethnicity angle as well. Many of the countries have large Indian communities there, Indian origin communities there. So those were the two that PM did. I did Quad, I did BRICS, I did IPSA, I did SARC. And I did G4. So those were at my level, and as you can see, each one really had a different focus. So the combinations were different, the agenda was different. But again, I would cite that to you really as a kind of broadening of foreign policy in many ways. And now, apart from that, PM also did a number of bilaterals. I also did a number of bilaterals. I forget his number. Yeah. Oh, okay. There's some number which is in a tweet. Okay.
16 bilateral.
Okay. Yeah. And whatever my number was, it's in the tweet, so you can you can look at it. It is 40 something. And look, I would say in most cases, it was actually the meetings were sought by the other party, because today people are interested in meeting us and talking to us. They do see a government which is very empowered by the electoral mandate that it had. They do look at India as a growing economy where which is both a source of new demands and new capabilities. So again, a lot of those conversations were really, in a way, very bilateral, in the sense, the country X was interested in what they could do with us and what we could do with them. Depending, of course, on the country, you would have a regional issue or a larger global issue. So it would depend very much on the country concerned. There were some other events, some of which I that this was for us a very satisfactory trip, that we were able to make our mark, make our impact globally. We were able in a number of areas to convince various countries on issues which were of importance to us. Overall, my reading would be most countries do have a sort of respect for the achievements of the last few years, do want to sort of build strong relationships with us for the future. And of course, for me, the Washington trip is really tending to a bilateral relationship, which is very important, and which history has shown you need to keep paying attention all the time. So why don't I stop there? I'm sure you'll have a lot. I mean, it was a very comfortable meeting. As I said, this is not the first time I'm meeting him. A big part of it was spent on various bilateral issues, and in a sense, we were doing stock taking post PM's meeting with Donald Trump, and both of us felt that while the trade issue had progressed for the larger relationship, it was important that we see some early results out there. We obviously discussed our immediate region, and we sort of discussed the larger sort of Asian landscape, what was happening in the region east of India as well, Southeast Asia. There's some discussion on the Gulf, and I think broadly that would be the flow.
Mr.
Sir.
Can you give us a sense of, in all these discussions, bilateral,
in terms of Article 370, I would find it hard to quantify, but I would say maybe in about half my meetings it came up, and maybe in half my meetings it didn't come up. Okay, I mean, it wasn't that every guy who came to me came with that burning question in the mind. Frankly, most of them were focused on their bilateral relations. Even those who raised it, but not necessarily as the first issue of interest to them. I think in the case of people who showed interest, it was more like, we have read about developments on the Kashmir, and it will be useful for us to hear from you. I would say I would walk people down the sort of path of what was happening, why it was happening, what was the history, what is the future we see, etc. Things which many of you have heard me do in other occasions. So it was variations of what I said in Carnegie today, or what I said to CFR or to Asia Society. I could see that in many cases a lot of what I said was new to them. When you explain to them that Article 370 was temporary, when you tell them that it was part of the Constitution of India, in which delegates from Jammu and Kashmir also took part, when you tell them that there was a provision within the article for the modification which took place, and you explain to them that look, today major source of concern was the fact that Jammu and Kashmir was really not aligned with the rest of India on a whole set of issues. And therefore, how do you really run a country where one large state is misaligned with the rest of the country? It's a very basic governance issue, which people have ducked in the past, but because they've ducked in the past doesn't mean that everybody keeps ducking in the future. I think once you walk them through this, I think most of them, understood it, got it. We didn't hear too much from them. Regarding the countries that, the other two countries that you mentioned, obviously somewhere they have been given an understanding which clearly is very different from the facts on the ground and the narrative that I laid out. So I think it's in diplomacy when somebody differs with you on an interest of issue of interest to you, then you work on that relationship and see where you can take it.
A related question, Mr. Jaishankar. In our right of reply, we address.
Actually issued a statement.
Yeah, through a spokesperson,
Yeah,
not
sure.
not on the floor of the assembly.
Yeah, but look, I think you're reading more into it than is what it is. Because I think whether we had said that at the on the floor of the UNGO, whether we put it out through the spokesman, it still had the same impact.
How was your remark that we can talk to Pakistan but not with terrorists taken?
My point is, unless you explain to people, you put things across to them, sometimes you have to put it across in a way in which it catches their attention. So I think that's what sort of diplomacy is about today. He's been raising his hand for some time, we don't mind. Yeah.
Wise people think alike.
Okay.
In the last few weeks.
No,
Come on, man.
I always keep a second alarm to get up.
Even less lofty.
Traditionally, you're exact opposite. So I think this is, I mean, by that logic, then we should not do anything which would bring Pakistan into the conversation at all. So, let's not talk Afghanistan. In fact, let's not talk South Asia. So my sense is people are over obsessing about it. It's often the argumentation comes from people who have a viewpoint that we shouldn't have done anything about 370. And mostly those people also have a viewpoint we shouldn't have done anything about most things. So I have very little tolerance for that.
On the question of President Trump's repeated offers to mediate, has that been put to?
I think somewhere, I don't know, or maybe it was not, I may have done this somewhere else. My point is very simple, okay. Whose issue is it? Mine? Okay. Who has to take the call? Me? If it is my issue and I have to take the call, I will decide whether I want somebody's mediation or not. You can offer anything you like, but if I decide that this is not relevant to me, it doesn't happen. Now, I'm very clear in my mind. So when people speak of, this has gone up and down, etc., where has it gone up and down? India has been very clear. I mean, India has been clear for 40 odd years that we won't accept mediation, that any, whatever has to be discussed bilaterally.
Does he get it that we don't want it?
I get it, no? So if I get it and I'm clear in my mind, as far as I'm concerned, that's what it's about. If you see many of the plurilaterals, most of them do tend to be done at the ministers' level. Okay? BRICS is done at the ministers' level, IPSA is done at the ministers' level, SARC is done at the ministers' level. So, to my mind, this was a natural progression which was waiting to happen. So I don't see anything terribly unusual about it. I think it was that you had to do 1 or 2 years of Sherpa work so that everybody was sure, okay, guys, this is what we want to do, because you had one earlier effort at it and it didn't work out so well. So I think people just wanted to be safe and sure about it. But I don't see a relationship between this, that's for the Navy to decide, who gets to do what exercise with whom. If it's a Navy exercise, that's more a service call rather than a diplomatic call. This is a diplomatic call. And by the way, my understanding is actually they do a very big bilateral exercise with the Australians. It's a very simple proposition. Try it out sometime, honestly. Ask saying, okay, do you have a neighbor who conducts terrorism against you? Obviously, the answer to from everywhere in the world other than India and Afghanistan, you will get a no. I mean, we be the two guys, we'll be the only two guys in the world who would say, yes, a neighboring state is actually doing this to us. Then you ask them, so suppose you were in my position, what would you do? You know what the answer is? So I think a lot of it is we need to put out our explanations with a reasonable amount of confidence, tell people, look, you know, facts are not self-explaining. Everybody, I mean, the world's a big place, okay? Things happen in different corners of the world, different issues. No, I wouldn't know how to divide up the time, but I'd say maybe about 1/3 bilateral and maybe 2/3 state of the world.
Minister, you said there's some early signs of progress on trade. What are these? What would be?
Two ministers and the negotiating teams have been talking to each other and discussing the details of how to address some of the trade frictions that they've had.
Dr. Jaishankar,
Question is that.
In Houston, the